All right. Hi, welcome. Welcome everybody who is here with us. So, what if men and women feel the same wounds but are taught to carry them differently? I am Marya Kazmi, also known as Brown Girl Interrupting, and this is Marya's Musings. It's a place to walk with me as I process life, find meaning, make connections, and offer others the same tools to look within. And tonight or today, I'm super excited because I have a special not even a guest because we're not having an interview. We're having a conversation and a dialogue. But I have a friend with me today, and we are going to be having a great conversation all about the idea of men and women and our perspectives on emotions and how we are processing things. So, please welcome Damion Taylor. Damion, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
I'm Damion Taylor, and I'm the founder of Purforos Technologies. I'm a creative and a technophile.
I love that. Okay, what's a technophile?
Someone who loves technology, like just toys, electronics.
I love that. I love that. I think my dad might have been a technophile. Now that you give me that name, now I know how to describe my father from here on out. My dad was a technophile for certain. Before, like, it was really like super digital stuff. He was all into it. That's a whole nother story. But I love it. So wait, and if you're with us right now and you're tuned in live, please hopefully make sure you are. Leave a comment, talk to us, ask us a question, all the things, and make sure that you subscribe, you like, you hit the bell, and that you leave a comment and share something with us. So I love this, and I'm really excited. Okay, so we're talking about this whole idea. So first of all, I have Damion here with me today because Damion, you kind of saw some of the stuff I was creating, and we are working on a project together already, which is my empowerment courses. So if you haven't heard about those courses, today you're going to learn a little bit more with all of our conversation of what the purpose of these courses are. But I have been putting these Marya's Musings out, and you heard some stuff, and I want to know what made you want to have this conversation with me, and why. Like, tell them where this all came from.
But I think for me, I saw one of your musings where you hit on the idea. I think the first one was, when you have a thought and you're pregnant, and you have to give birth to it, and you're like, hey, this works for men too. Like, if you have something, you want to create it, and you want to let it go, and just being someone who is creative but also very technical, I've seen that firsthand in experience where there's something, you want to get it out, you want to make it real, but you sometimes just don't because of fear or whatever. And briefly in that conversation, you hit on the topic of how some of those social norms and that social training that we get can impact that. And it really got me to thinking about how a lot of what you talk about is very relevant for both men and women. And especially I think in this time, this point in history where we're seeing like women starting to really come into their own, but men haven't really found like, wait, how do I fit into this new world? Right. Fight it, or do you stay with it? And so, after seeing that, I think I sent you a text message or something, and then we got on a call and started diving deep into it. And I think the rest is history, and we'll probably talk about it later on today.
Yeah, no, but I love that, and I appreciate that you said that, right? Like I think for me, okay, and so for me, the reason I'm diving into this is I'm a woman, right? Like, so like for me, I get the woman part of things, but I'm raising 3 men. And that has been like my reason of wanting to understand this aspect of men so much, but it's led me to learn so much that I think has, to your point, like I just see all this like universal things that really, like when we're thinking about our socialization, we're like we're in the same socialization lanes, right? But we have different emotional like impacts that are coming out of it, right? So it's kind of similar, but then yet different. And I think also for me, it's like, where's the disconnect in our communication because of it? Where's that like challenge of not understanding each other? So what I'm excited about is I am constantly talking about this stuff to myself. I feel like on this show. time I get to like actually hear some perspectives from a man on like your thoughts on it, right? So okay, so let's just start with that, right? When we think about how men and women can experience the same emotional wounds, but we're carrying them differently. Like, what do you think about when you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. Part of what I think about is just growing up. So my parents got divorced when I was fairly young, and so we lived with my mom, and we'd see my dad sometimes, but it wasn't consistent. And in that, just being consistently all the time exposed to just mom's friends who had recently been divorced as well, and their kids who we were all really close and grew up together. There was this network of women who really came together, and they all had they all had sons, and so it's me and my brothers and all of these boys, and these moms raising us, and so it was sort of this nice community of that. And one of the things that was interesting is it forced me to see the world through the perspective of someone who wasn't like me, both for the
Mhm.
good and the bad. So I could see how my parents' relationship hurt my mother and how my father's actions hurt her. But I could also see that some of her frustrations and bitterness were misplaced, and that
Mm.
there was there's a certain level of flexibility that she has as a woman that men don't get. And I especially would see it when we go to my grandparents' house. So my mom was, she's, oh, let's make sure you understand your feelings. You can talk about them. It's great. And then you get my grandparents and my grandfather and my uncle saying, like, you're a boy. You can't do that. Stuff it down. Be stoic. Like all of those things, right? And
Yeah.
so spending so much time in both of those households, it becomes like, which one do I do? And you learn to, well, here I'll do this and there I'll do that. Or you just take whichever one is going to be the lowest common denominator and can satisfy both, right? Um, and so it makes me think of how, as a kid, having to see that dichotomy very clearly, it made me start wondering and questioning and thinking, well, why is it that it's okay for my cousin to cry because she's a girl, but all of us boys cannot, right? Even
Mm.
though like we might be bleeding and like something's falling off your body, and you're like, nope, why are you crying? Shut that crying up, right? But her toy broke and she can cry. I'm literally injured and I'm not supposed to cry. Like those two things just
Yeah.
seem really kind of odd to me, right? But then I'm also the oldest in my family, and so I had this really weird position where normally in at least growing up in my family, the oldest girl took care of everything else. Like she was the one who would help and assist, and but there was no oldest girl. It was all boys until one of my cousins who's like 10 years after me. And so by that point there's a whole bunch of boys, and I had to take on the responsibilities that would have been normally like the oldest girl. And so it was just, that became a little bit weird too, where it's you're the boy, but now you got to watch the kids. Why am I babysitting? Because you're a great babysitter, and I got to make dinner. Because why? You're the oldest. You're not going to set the house on fire. But then at the same time, let's go outside and play at the park. You want to play some football? Like so, it had like all of these mixed
So
gender roles out of necessity for me. And so, just thinking about that, I had to force myself to understand the dynamics of how those things work together and where they all come from.
that's so wild. Like, I love that you're able to go back to like, thinking about those dynamics, but, like, I think, like, I always wonder, like, so then I mean, it seems like it was, like, these 2 different pieces of yourself, like, you're living almost dual spaces, like, navigating it. So, like, as you started to get, like, older, like, I guess it's a so I don't want to make this an interview, but I have so many questions. So many
No,
questions,
no,
right?
no, no.
It's just
Let's go deep. Let's dig
I'm
in.
an interviewer, right? Like, that is what I do, but I'm like, I just like, how did you manage that though? Like, what did you feel about yourself when you were told something that countered what you were doing or showing up as?
I think that's one of the difficult things, and that's really where this conversation comes from is how do you manage those things? And I think the short answer is you just do the best you can, right? But then I think when you go deeper, sometimes it's rebellion, right? Just I'm gonna buck against everything that I'm told just so that I can choose for myself. Like if I don't get to choose and I'm told that I have to do this, then I'm just gonna do what I want and make everybody mad. Or it's a
Mhm.
radical acquiescence, like sure, whatever you want, right? So like, I think for me it was a little bit of the radical acquiescence, up until maybe the end of high school, starting in college. And then in college, I went the complete opposite way, right? Just I'm gonna do whatever I want. You can say what you want, but I don't live here anymore, so it's not your choice, right? Like it was that
Right.
moment where I was like, I'm grown, I can do this.
Okay, but yes, except though the thing is that, yes, it happened at home, but I think the whole thing, again, to your point, why we're having the conversation is it doesn't just end at home, right? Like, it goes into
No.
work, it goes into your sports relationships, it goes into, any community thing you're doing, anything you're a part of. Those gender roles, those socialization patterns of how you're supposed to show up come back and hit you as like, are you doing the thing the right way? Are you showing up the way you're supposed to? And then we internalize them.
And I think that's what's really interesting, because then college especially is where I started to see that the figuring out where things are, who should do what, was actually just as confusing for women as men. Because I would hear girls say like, I want a guy who's sensitive, and they're like, oh my God, he was so sensitive, I can't stand it, like I need a guy who. And so you'd see them like saying both things. And I remember one of my friends who, he's a really good friend, but to me, I'm just like, dude, turn off the waterworks, why are you so sensitive, like come on, right? But then at the same time, I remember there was this one person who I went to college with. She was like, oh my God, he's so sensitive, I love it. And so she was all about it, right? But on the other hand, they're like, oh my God, he's just so cold. And so you really had both sides trying to figure it out, but from a different perspective. And I realized that, going back and thinking about what my mom had been going through and how she talked about it, there's a lot of, I want this thing to change, but you've internalized these behaviors and these norms to the point where you want these things to change, but then you perpetuate the very thing you say you want to change. And it's really hard because it's so subversive. I mean, it's not even subversive. It's everywhere. It's woven into the fabric of how we think, what we eat, what we wear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so pervasive and foundational to everything that happens in our societies that you really start to challenge it. And for me, where it really became a completely different question and kind of blew my mind was when I left the US and realized that there were norms for what being male meant in other countries that weren't the same as here.
Oh,
And so then that kind of like, what? I
okay.
don't
Well,
even
so
know what
tell
to
me
do with
more.
that.
I want to know more about these norms. Like, what's the difference then in other countries? Like, where in particular, and like, what's that difference?
So when I moved to Spain for a year and a half, and on the surface it didn't seem that different, right? And everyone's like, oh, the Latino machismo and stuff. And yes, that exists. But at the same time, it was very common. Like one of my best friends still to this day, like, oh, you see your best friend, he gives you a hug and he would give you a kiss. I was like, wait a minute, guys don't do that. But
Mm.
he was just a really genuine person. And it wasn't just him. My roommates are like, hey, we love this song, or we just watched soccer, and everyone's hugging and dancing together, right? He's like, oh, let's go dance. It's like, it's two guys, and they're not dancing with each other, but they're dancing with each other. And like, oh, look, there's some girls over there. Let's go over there. And they were just small things that don't necessarily happen the same way in the US that they did there.
But that's so interesting because I think, like, so you talk about, like, there's the message of machismo and that, like, outward almost like belief, but then the physicality is different, it sounds like. And there's like
Yeah.
this comfort of, it's almost like the level of machismo you may have, or like, or whatever masculinity is like, is able to give you so much like girth that you can, I don't, that's probably not the right word, but in context, but you know what I mean, right? Like,
Yep.
but so much leeway to show
Yeah.
up in like your total fullness of, yeah, I'm gonna give my guy a hug and kiss him and like slap him on the ass, whatever it is, right? Like it's
Yeah.
okay because I'm at that level of ability of being so macho. Like it's like it sounds like there's that balance almost, which is interesting. And I don't know if that's what you saw, but that's what I heard just now.
And like I don't even know if it's balance or if it's just cultural, like what's accepted. Because I remember a friend's dad. We went to go visit over, I think it was spring break or something, and his dad saw him and gave him a big kiss, and he was like, "Oh, Dad, the kisses." He's like, "Your mustache." She's like, "You shut up, boy. You're never going to be too big for your dad to give you kisses, right?" That's something that I would never hear here, right? Like
Yeah.
my dad freaked out when he's like, "I heard that this boy, his mom let him sit down to pee." Like he freaked out, like that's not good. I was like, well, I mean, what if he just didn't want to miss?
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe she just didn't want to mess in her bathroom.
right. Like, and after having my own son, I'm like, that's legit. I was like, dude, the toilet's right there. How did you miss it? Like, it's right there. So, but I think there are just certain norms. My dad freaked out when I got my ears pierced. Women get their ears pierced. Not today. Mine are, right? So he's like, well, could you just do one? Why'd you do both? Because I felt imbalanced. I don't know. Like, I just wanted to. This was in college, of course, but I think you just start to see those distinctions. And then one of my best friends in high school, and like we went to college together, was Korean. And I spent a lot of time with my friends from Korea and a lot of my Asian friends. And one of my friends, her brother was a K-pop idol, like in the 90s, like before now. But like even then, the idea of what's an attractive man was he was wearing makeup and he was very pretty, right? It wasn't like macho man. It was, and like he may have been rapping and doing whatever, but he had on eyeliner and eyeshadow and lipstick, like just the whole nine. And then the same with my friends who were, I met a lot of interesting people. I had this whole contingency of friends who were really super gothic, and it was the same thing. Like, oh, I got my sister's skirt, and do you want to go to this club with us? I think you can wear her clothes, and like fishnets, and like it was just this interesting idea, and all of it seemed to me like it doesn't make sense. It's not what I was told it's supposed to be. That's not a guy.
Cognitive dissonance, right?
Exactly.
But that goes to the whole idea, like, of our socialization has led us to believe there's one way. And like when we see this other ways of being, it starts to counter what we think is quote unquote normal or accepted, right? Like, and so that's like one big piece. But what we really want to talk about, and like I think what we were getting to, right, is but there's deeper elements to this, right? Like there's that, but then it's like, so how does it manifest though in the patterns that we inherit? So like I had talked about, to your point, like there was the one about birthing, but I also talked about this idea of perfectionism and how perfectionism, and it was my own theory, let's be honest, fully a Marya theory. It wasn't like I read this somewhere, but I want to know your thoughts on it because like I think so. I believe perfectionism is something that I often, and in all the time that I've now done this show, my show Pain to Power, and been writing and like doing this work as Brown Girl Interrupting, which by the way, go watch Pain to Power every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. If you don't do it yet. Shameless plug because it's my show. So like,
you got to.
But I got to, right? Damion, please feel free to plug anything you need, right? So, but the thing is, like, I think what keeps coming up universally for women is the idea of perfectionism that turns out to be where we overgive, we sacrifice ourselves and our own happiness and our own everything, or we feel like we're not enough or we're too much. Like all of that starts to come into this idea of perfectionism. But my theory is that I think men also have it. And for me, I interpret it as the fact that it's that protector energy that comes out of men, of the perfectionism of, as a man, I need to be the provider, the protector. So I've seen it come out in men when they may lose their jobs or something happens and they're no longer able to show up in their full, like, I can take care of everything kind of modes. And that perfection that they've been told as men is masculinity now is being questioned or is like not present, right? So I want to know from you, do you see perfectionism coming up for men too? And what other ways? Like, is it that? And is there other ways?
No, I think you hit the nail spot on. I think you have that perfectionism, right? That's I should be the protector, the provider. But then interestingly, part of that is you're emotionally unavailable because you have to be stoic. You're not allowed to show your emotions because it makes everyone else feel like, oh no, things are falling apart, right? So when everything's falling apart, you just have to be a rock, right? So there's that piece too, right? And so like emotionally, you shut it down. Everyone else can fall apart and cry, but not you. You can't have a bad day. And if you do, the only emotion that's okay to show is anger, right? Like you have such a narrow lane, right? And so, and for a long time, like my wife will tell you, she's like, he doesn't have emotions, because I was like, nope, shut it down, right? I'm like, why go cry in public, in private, where no one will know? Like, don't let anybody know that happens. But I think you see that, and now it's changing, because I think there's also the perfectionism of sort of your outward appearance too, right? Like you're expected to now, like, women are supposed to look this way, men are supposed to look this way, and we're seeing those more rigid definitions of what men are supposed to look like and how physically fit they're supposed to be and how to maintain that starting to creep into the idea of masculinity. You should have big biceps, big bulging chest, you should be tall, you should have a really deep voice, like all of these things, right? And you need to have six packs, because if not, women won't like you. And it's always in reference to like getting a partner. And then you should be stoic still. And so there are all of these things that typically were associated with perfectionism for women that are now overlapping with men, and the current dynamics of what men have with, like, you're still a protector, you're still a provider, you're
Right.
still the stoic one. So like, how do you do all of these things and then at the same time be sensitive and have a six pack and like how does that work, right?
Why can't you be all of it? No, like, but no, that's true. And I think like so I don't think women understand that level of what, and not that I think we have our own things that are the you have to be all the things, right? Like
Yeah.
but this isn't about us right now. So I but really like I'm wondering like when men have all those things and women don't get they have all those things, what happens to where men like where do you find your space then? Where do you find the place where you can be the things you need to have? I think the big thing for me, and I talk about this a lot in the course, is that we have to find some space where we give ourselves grace, where we allow ourselves to feel all the feelings in order to unpack them and recognize what's really ours and what's been given to us. So
Hmm.
where does that happen for men most comfortably, I guess, maybe?
It's interesting because I don't know that there's really a space that's universally the place for men to do that, right? Sometimes it could be a barbershop, sometimes it could be at a sporting thing. But if I think about, like, we had a friend several years ago who was married and then found out his wife was cheating on him and was getting a divorce, and she was cheating on him with someone that they worked with, who we knew, and he'd been brought into our friend group, and like we had been picking him up to like take him on trips with all of us, like and like it was really, it was messy and it was bad. And so my friend
Mm.
was like kind of really crushed. And the interesting thing is, at first we're like, we'll go get him drunk and get him laid, let's go, right? um but then when we got there, he was just kind of like, guys, I don't know what to do. And for the first time, it was like, we've known each other since freshman year of college, so it's been almost 30 years, right? So there was a certain level of freedom of expression there that we don't normally get. And one of our friends, who was sort of the glue to the group, um, was like, I would feel he and like, you don't normally talk about feelings. He's like, if I were in your position, I would feel like I'd want to destroy everything she touched, and I'd want to do this to him. And he's like, but you remained so calm. How do you do that? And so then we got in this whole conversation around feelings, and he was like, I'm hurt, but I also don't want to destroy her, because that would destroy me. I want her to be happy, but I don't think she had to do it at my expense. Right.
Mm.
And we ended up like, at that point, then we're like, we're drinking, and then it's like well, let's talk about our feelings, man. Like, but there had to be like that social lubricant to some extent, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
something that was just gonna happen. And I think that was something that was like 20 years in the making. We wouldn't have done that in high school. We wouldn't have done it in college. It wasn't until we were older and all married, and some people had kids, that it was kind of like, well, I mean, we're getting old. Why do I care? Right? Like, we were able to do that.
And it sounds like then there's a trust thing there too. So I guess maybe the question is not where, it's more of like or when.
Who?
I think it's like I wonder it's who and like what are the conditions? Because I think we again going back to like so much of this with socialization and being able to be our full selves is we need to have the right conditions in place. So what are the conditions that men are 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 needing, requiring, asking for to be able to feel free enough to say those things, right? To
Yeah.
process them, to share them, to allow a space for someone else to share them, right?
And I think you hit the nail on the head again. It's trust. There has to be someone who you can fully trust. I saw an Instagram video about this woman's like, oh, my man, he comes home and he's not sensitive and he does blah 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 and I don't like it. And so the guy on stage, interesting, he's a rapper. I forgot who it was. Said maybe it's because when he comes home, he doesn't have a safe place. He has to still be on for you, and he has to be on when he's outdoors and he's at work and he's just in the store, right? So when you should be his safe place, you're not. So he goes somewhere where he can find that safe place, and it's not you. And she
Mhm.
was like, "What?" And I started to think about it, and I know that so many men are one of the things that is harmful to them is the idea of this trophy wife or girlfriend. Like your your partner is a prize and like an item or an object to be possessed and to be shown off, that kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And in that sort of thinking, you don't necessarily get the person who's going to allow you to be vulnerable, to allow you that moment to let down your guard before you have to put it back up and face the world again, right? And so if you think of that person who has their guard up all the time, even at home when they're supposed to be like the most protected and safe, right? They're not. And so you find people looking for it in other places, or it ends up being just suffering, right? Like you mentioned, like giving too much of
Suffering.
yourself
Right.
and like do it until there's nothing of you left. And I think that's something that really does happen. And I saw it with my grandfather as well, how he was that way until he hit about 70. And then when he hit 70, suddenly he was like super nice and like he gave you hugs and like my mom was even like, this is not the man I grew up with, because the man I grew up with I wanted to kill, but this one I don't know who he is. Um, but he's like, I'm old now. I don't care. I can say whatever I want. And that was like he got to a point to where it didn't matter. And
Mm.
I want people to. Me, I think it'd be important to help men get to that point before they're 70, right?
No, yeah, definitely, right? So you should come join the course Empowerment Unlocked, because that's what we're going to be talking about is how do we get to those points before we're 70. I want to just point out, well, two things. One, I think it's quite telling that as men get older, they get more, they like your example, right? There's a comfortability of being more open. Women, we get older and we just get meaner. Like, we get to the no fucks given anymore stage by like 50,
Mhm.
and then like we will just tell you exactly what we feel, no holds barred, because I think that women have been holding it, we have holding a different part of like that pleasing people thing, right? Like we show up with the pleasing people, not necessarily the holding back our emotions, but we show our emotions, but we're still pleasing people, and then like by then, we're no longer. But you bring up like the trust thing. I want to unpack that a little bit more. Um, because okay, so full disclosure, it just came from my therapy appointment.
On the
And
way to mine next.
right, and you're on yours next, right? Like, but so trust, the idea of trust came up, and she asked me, well, what does trust feel like or look like to you? And I had to think about it for a second, but when you said it just now, and I think this is the thing that becomes a disconnect between men and women, is that are we looking for trust even in the same way? So do you think men see trust in the same way women do?
I think both see trust in the same way, but the way that men test the waters is different than women, right?
Mm.
It's I'll say that one thing that's a little bit vulnerable and see what you say, right? And depending on what you do, like one false move that you don't get a second time. You might, if you're lucky, you will, but most of the time, if you don't, the first time, oh, yep, nope, can't trust you, done, shut it down, it's closed, I'm sealed off,
Oh,
go for somewhere else, right?
okay.
The likelihood of trying to try it again is small. I mean, I think we talked about this the other day. One of the things that's really telling about the idea and the notion of masculinity is that it's really hard to attain, but really
Mm,
easy and really fragile, right? So it's easy to lose it and you can break it in a moment. So you've done all these things, and so you're always on guard protecting that one piece, because if that one moment you're vulnerable, you're like, oh wait, you're crying? Why are you crying? Are you man up? Right? Like, oh, sorry, shut it down. Not gonna happen again, right? So I think there
mm,
are these moments where you test the waters And in one false move, nope, never mind, can't trust you. Keep going, right? Just hold it. Like I've been holding it this long. We'll see what happens next.
That's interesting, but actually that makes so much sense in all the experiences I've had, right? Like, and I guess it goes back to socialization. Like, there's something that what women give so many chances. Like we also have issues with trust, but we'll be like, "Oh, I don't trust you, but I'm going to give you another chance," right? Like, I don't trust you, but I think maybe I'll like, and we do it over and over again. But men, no, y'all are like, nope, that's like for the
And
most.
if you think about it, it's interesting. One of the things that I don't know that women realize is the amount of influence and power they have in how men behave and what they do and why they do the things that they do. Um, so I think a great example is, oh, when I wear this cologne, women give me attention. Something really simple, really small, but it works, right? Or when I say this thing, women respond to me positively. I wore that shirt though, and someone said it looked like I beat up my little sister and stole her clothes. So I'm not wearing that anymore, right? So like you start to get like these things like women like this, women don't like that, and men start to behave based on that. And even when women are younger, they there's an ability for women to be cruel and not realize it because they assume that you're a man, you don't have feelings, you can take it, you're strong enough, kind of things, right? So they'll
Mm.
say little mean things or little digs, and guys are just stoic and like, oh, whatever, right? And sometimes you do just roll, it just rolls off your back, and you're like, whatever. But then sometimes you internalize it, and you're like, okay, I got to change that so that no one else can say that to me again. And so there are these little things, and I think so often women assume that men are just brick walls, and so it'll bounce off or like whatever. And but in reality, what they're doing is gradually in small bites internalizing those things, right, and adjusting their
Mm.
behavior accordingly. And I don't know if women realize that. Like men probably won't tell you this, but like I'm married, I don't care. I'm not. What do I got to lose, right?
Giving the
But
secrets away. Well, no, I appreciate that. No, but I think that's like that's a really good point. So it's like you're collecting data. Like men are constantly collecting, which makes sense because y'all are very analytical people to the most part, right? Like a little bit more analytical than emotive in many ways, right? Like so collecting data on
but I
yourself
don't know that
and
that's
people's
the
responses.
default for men or not. And so there's a psychiatrist who I was reading, like having a son has made me think about things very differently, right? And there's this psychiatrist who was talking about how he looks at like the development of little boys to young men to adult men.
Mhm.
And when you look at boys as children, they're by far more emotional and volatile than little girls are. They're all over the place. They're like excited, they're mad, they're crying, and they're just everywhere, right? Little girls can kind of control themselves a little bit better, but
Mhm.
they're also taught that it's okay to show their emotions. And he pointed out that there are kind of like these big milestones where you start to see men shutting down. The first is kindergarten. It's 5 years old. They're told to go to school. They have to behave. They have to sit still. They have to be quiet. And they start interacting with other boys and other kids. And then the next is usually around sixth or seventh grade, right? That's when it's like, okay, girls are coming into it. You have to be stoic. This is what manhood is. And then the last one is around 15. And at each of those points, what you slowly start to see is little boys exhibit less and less emotional connection with people. They start to become more stoic. We talk about sports. We do this thing. We can be rambunctious, but we don't express, and little by little, kind of shutting themselves off, right? And so I started thinking about that, and it's very true. And I remember even in like junior high, don't do that because girls won't like you, or don't do that because then you won't look masculine, or like don't do that because you'll look this way, or and so you start to conform to whatever those norms are or those rules are. And then by the time I was in high school, like I remember thinking, I wish I could just be stoic and silent, but I'm not. I'm chatty, and I'm
Mhm.
like, I like to play jokes on people, and like I that's not me, but let me try really hard. It'll be better if I do that. And I remember just thinking that and so from like my sophomore year in high school all the way through college, even I was probably clinically depressed. To be honest, it was miserable. I hated
Mhm.
everything, right? But um, I learned a lot, and it forced me to look inward and kind of get to know myself better. And fortunately, I've never had a problem being by myself. I actually enjoy it sometimes, well, a lot of times. So I think it's helped me to kind of just watch the world around me and kind of look at how I interact with it and see things differently than most people. But all of those things force a certain amount of socialization. And then later on, it's reinforced by men thinking like this is what a woman should be to complement what I'm supposed to be. And then women thinking this is what a man should be to complement what I'm supposed to be. But
Right.
now that those definitions are changing, there's a what do we do about it? Like right now, when I do drop off in the morning, most of the people like it's about 60%, 70% dads, and the rest are moms, which is I never saw dads when I was going to school. Like
Yeah,
dads didn't drop off; it was just mom,
mm,
right? But now we have this dad crew, and we're like texting each other, and we hang out. It's like it's a totally different beast, right? Um, that wasn't a thing before. Or like mom
no,
didn't go travel for work. One of my friends, his wife's been traveling for 2 weeks, and he's been alone with his two daughters, and he's like, "Oh, I got to school," and like he's doing the thing, right? There's no way my dad would have called reinforcements. Would have had both sets of grandparents, and like they would have, just take them to your house.
right.
Like,
No, I mean, I remember, like, when I first had kids and my kids were young, I remember, like, that was the joke, right? Like, dads don't know what to do, and I will say, credit to my ex, the one thing is that he definitely did show up with it. He knew how to change diapers, he knew how to make food for the kids, like, he wasn't incapable, but that's, like, a thing for a long time, that was, like, the running joke is men don't do and that's only, like, a few I mean, my kid's, like, 20, right? Like, 25, so
yeah,
I feel like, 20 years ago, that wasn't a common thing at all, and it wasn't the cool thing for men, like, it wasn't a thing, whereas I feel like now it definitely has shifted, but there's, so there's there's the ways we've been socialized and told to be, and then there's the ways that, like, we have to adapt to the fact that no, because I think people are waking up to but that's not the only thing, right? Like, dads are very much involved in their kids' lives, right? Like, dads can very much do all the I mean, like, I think about my boys and I'm like, well, my boys, like, my son cooks more than his wife. Like sometimes, but not she cooks too. Okay, I know this is gonna go
yeah.
she cooks too. Everybody cooks, but he cooks, right? Like he makes meals and not just like, oh, it's I have to make something, like plans a meal out, does elaborate meals, food to his like he takes food to his army base or Air Force base and feeds people, but that's not the environment he was raised in necessarily, right? Like, so it's just I think people are forging their own path still, right? Which is cool because we're adapting, but then I think I go back to, like, what you were saying about how you felt in high school, and thank you for pointing out those milestones, like, that was really powerful. I had never thought about it like that, but as you said it, I'm picturing all 3 of my boys in all 3 of those ages and moments and can see exactly what you just mapped out, right? Like, and but how often does that suppression of self then lead to depression or it leads to some kind of like even volatility at times, right? Like there's different
Mhm.
things that it can lead to. So that's and then another pattern that we're socialized into that needs to be unlearned in some way. So what would you say helped you to stop doing that? I know you like talked yourself through it a little bit, but are there other things that you did to get through unlearning of that?
I think for me, it was when I left the US and lived in another country. So the ways of interacting were different. I mean, it was even at the time in the 90s when I went, like it looked a lot like now. Baggy pants were really popular. So the baggier the better, right? When I went to Spain, it was the opposite. And guys were wearing like really tight Levi's. And I'm just like, no, that's not masculine at all, right? Can see way too much. And like trying to buy clothes and realizing that I'm not going to find clothes here that aren't that. So what do I do? Right? um, but understanding then starting to realize that, hold on, if this can be the thing here, and then that's the thing over there, how do both of these exist when they seem to be to some extent at odds with each other, right? Um, and really then making really good friends who were open and who you can have those deep conversations with. Um, it was an odd experience because I was always like, "What are you trying to get from me? Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you telling me this stuff? This is weird, right?"
Mhm.
But then slowly without realizing it, I started to become acculturated to that sort of behavior, right? Because all day, every day, that's what I was living. That's who my roommates were. That's who my friends were, right?
Mhm.
And coming back home, then it was a weird kind of like affront to like, why are you guys this way? This is so like brutish. And but in doing that, I realized that, wait a minute, this seems like it's all based on who's around you, on what people say you should be doing versus anything that's sort of like a true and right natural law of any sort.
Mm.
Um, and so I think it was just being taken out of my environment and being made into a fish out of water that made me have to see things differently because I don't have anything to cling to. I have to kind of float and go where I'm, most able to survive in that scenario.
Mm. But you're pushed into it a little bit more. But so I
Mhm.
guess and then for those people who are in these spaces right now, maybe watching, maybe listening, right? Like there's gotta be some other ways though, because we can't always change our environment, right? But what we
Yep.
can do is there's some internal things we can do. There's some patterns we can start to examine and think about, right? Like, and there are some changes that we can make. So like is there I always start with so in the course, we talk about the idea that we begin with our mindset. So the framework is return, and we've remembered, we've examined these things, right? Like, and then
Yep.
we transform our mindsets. What might be, when you think back now, as a man, one of the mindsets that needs to shift to get men to feel that they can show up in their authenticity, whatever that means for them?
I think probably the most powerful thing for me, and I think potentially for anyone that you could do, is asking why for everything. Question everything, right? So I'm going
Mm.
to wear this shirt. Why? Why this shirt, not another one? And,
Mm.
and, and I
That's a
and I
powerful
don't. I mean, you don't need to go that deeply, but sometimes I realize there were clothes in my closet that I just didn't want to wear. Like I don't want to wear that shirt. Why? Kind of small, and I didn't know, or like it's uncomfortable, or so. Then I was like, why am I holding on to this stuff? Just get rid of it, right? And so I realized if I was doing that with things in my closet, what about in my life? Like, oh well, why am I doing this? Or I can't do that. Well, why can't I do it? What's
Mm.
stopping me from doing it? And being willing to ask why is it's hard because sometimes you'll have to admit things that you don't want to admit to yourself, but you at least start thinking about it, right? Like, why am I working so hard to get a six pack? It's like, because when I go to the beach, I want girls to look at me, right? So, okay, well, that makes sense. But what if you don't have a six pack? And then you can start to ask the what if, right? And the what if is where possibilities happen. And so, but you don't get to what if you never ask why.
Right. And then you don't get to understand yourself if you're not asking why, right? Which I love.
Yeah.
I like that. That is so simple and real and like and universal because we can all use it, right? Like I
Yeah.
mean women too, right? Like why? Why? And I think that is like one of those things, right? Like why am I exactly doing this? Who is it for? What is it for? What's the purpose? Why am I saying this? What do I want to get back from this right now, right? And you
Hmm.
know what you're expecting and when you're trying to control things too much that you don't really have control over and you know when you're doing something based on what someone else has told you is or isn't like acceptable or good or valued, right? Like so you're really starting to unpack your socialization, right? Like those questions, but that simple question of why. I really like that, Damien. That's
I'm
awesome.
I'm a simple kind of guy. Like I realize if I break it down and make it as small as possible, I'm more likely to do it.
Wait, okay, so now aren't most men simple? I had a friend talk to me yesterday, he was like, "We're just real simple people. Like, we y'all make us more complicated than we are." I mean, do you think that's like, is that real? Like, when women
I
just
think it is
overcomplicate
though.
what we think about men?
I think it is because I mean, just when I talk to my friends and we're like, just do what works until it doesn't work anymore, and then you do something else. Like that's it, right? Like why make it more difficult? Like I do know a couple of guys who are just way more complicated than they need to be, but then they're always in their heads and like I got to go write about this now, and like they have their own space, right? But for the most part, even they are kind of like, nah, just do it simple, right? Like I used to tell my wife when we were dating, and it was really harsh, but I wasn't very tactful back then. Well, sometimes I'm not still, but I would say, let me tell you this. men are simple and women are stupid. And she's like, what? And I was like, nope, nope. Men will do what's simple and what works, right? Women know better, yet they still try to do things to please men. And I was like, so it's not that like they can't do it. It's not like they don't know better. But they'll just do it anyway. And I was like, that's stupid. But they can. The good thing about being stupid is you can fix it, right? And then the good thing about being simple is that, well, if you assume that you're simple, you can always ask someone to, hey, can you think of it in these terms for me? Or this is how, like, you can, if you're simple, it's easy to communicate with everyone. If you're too complex, then people may not be able to keep up with you, right? It's easier to be simple and kind of talk to someone who's really complicated and advanced versus being complicated and trying to distill something down.
Yes, I know that very well. Might be my life story. The complicated, trying to always help other people understand me. But then that goes back to like the why. Like we need to start asking ourselves as women the why, because why are we doing the things we're doing that we know we shouldn't be doing, right? Like that's a big one.
And I think sometimes it's reading intent where there is none, right? Like there was this woman I used to follow on TikTok, and she
I'm
was
the
really
worst
funny.
at that.
Why did he left that glass there on purpose? Because he knew I couldn't get to this other thing until I finished washing those dishes, and he doesn't really care. And she made this whole story about it. And she's like, well, in actuality, like I talked to my husband, he was like, oh no, I thought I'd come back for it, so I just left it there and I forgot. She was like, what? Like she thought she had this whole story in her head, and it was literally like I was going to come back for it and I forgot, right? And so, but I think men do that in other ways. It may not be necessarily the same in relationships, but it's sometimes in the competition with each other, right? It's always okay, he's my competition. I got to make sure, like, we're friends, but we're not really friends. So I got to make sure that I'm on guard because just in case he might want to do this. So it's always like a chess of one-upsmanship. And so you're doing that, but it's just in a different space. It's more in a competitive perspective, from a perspective than like
not trying to interpret someone kind of perspective, which women do. Oh my God, Damion, you know me so well. Damn, all those things. But our whole thing, you're very right with the intent thing, is how many arguments have women created. I'm thinking of like multiple conversations I've had with people in the last few weeks, and I was like, oh shit, that's exactly what I did. I thought intent and went like a whole nother direction of what I thought might have happened, or what I thought the conversation was, or what the situation was, and like it just, it was nothing like that. I was like, nah, I was just tired, right? Like I was like, what?
My wife and I used to get in arguments all the time, and it was like I would, in my head, like, I said what I meant. Like, that's exactly, but she would read more into it. I feel like you're judging me from, I was like, why would I be judging you? And then in my head, I was like, why are you crazy? You're so crazy. And so like, we both now created this narrative about the other that's totally not true. And then one time, one of my therapists was like, how about we do this? Anytime you're going to get in an argument, you feel like that's happening, stop yourself. Don't justify, don't do anything. Repeat back what you understood. And just repeat it in very simple terms, like, okay, so what I'm understanding you said is this. Am I correct in that? And they're like, no, what I meant was, oh, okay. Because sometimes I would interpret meaning into, why are you being so crazy? Why are you just getting mad at me? I didn't do anything. But in her head, she's like, you said this thing and you must have meant something by it.
Yeah.
In actuality, I'm just sarcastic, right? Like my son knows this now, but like she's like, hey, he's sarcastic. Your dad is just sarcastic, right? And she gets it. But when we were first dating and first married, that was not good. She's like, you don't really mean that about me, do you? I was like, of course I don't. She's like, can I believe you now? Why wouldn't you? So like
but then there's learning people's patterns, right? Like learning those patterns too, right? And so it's funny, like when you just mentioned that, I thought about, again, like something we do that I've done in the course, or that I do in the course, is that like it's paired verbal fluency, where like literally we practice that process of like, how do you listen to someone else without wanting to jump in to add your own thoughts, but simply listening and then saying back what you're hearing from them, right? Like that is a real practice that you have to like actually put time into, right? To your point, like I think your therapist is like that's that move, right? Like to really, like, I'm not listening for what I want to hear, I'm listening for what you actually said. And that's it. And
And
not
that's hard.
putting any of my own interpretation into it, but simply, "These are the things you said. Here's the facts of what I heard." And it is really hard. It is really, really hard. So we have to put that intentionality and work into it. Um
I have to admit, like the first time like I got through that with my wife and we didn't end up arguing, I was just like, wait a minute, we didn't argue. And she's like, we did it. We did it. Like, I mean, it's not to say that we don't have arguments. Like people have disagreements all the time, but it's not like the blowout, like, no, but you said, I didn't say that. You said that. Like that doesn't happen necessarily anymore. And so, but it took a while and it was kind of bumpy for a minute. It was like, wait a minute, hold on. Let me dial it back. Um, and even just being able to be clear in communicating what you want, which is, I think some of the socialization prevents that, right? If you're a man, you're stoic and you don't communicate. You just sit, you grunt, you look. You can be angry, but you don't really say like, I feel. I remember for a while, like I feel was not in my vocabulary. I would not like, why would I say that? I no, that's state facts. If you want to argue with me, you
Mhm.
gotta state facts, right? I'm still like that to some extent, but um with my wife was like, my feelings. I'm like, nobody cares about your feelings. Tell me what's going on. Like, give me the facts, right? And so like we were arguing past each other because I'm looking for one thing, she's looking for something else.
Yeah, yeah. What we're looking for, right? Like, again, that lens of, like, what we wanna hear, what we think we're seeing, like, we have to, what is that quote? There's a quote that's, "We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are."
Yes.
Right? So, I love that. Oh my god, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you so much. Like, I'm curious now, I don't know if there was anything you were curious. Like, I know we unpacked men quite a bit here, but I'm like, should we do we need to have this about women, or, like, are we I talk about us all the time, I feel like, so I don't know.
But I'm wondering, I think what would be interesting, and I don't know if we have time for it today, but is going through and kind of like I don't know if it's a Q&A session or if we just kind of unpack like how women perceive men, like seeing men through women's eyes. Because I think for a lot
Ooh.
of men, me included, still, it's a bit of a. Most men will tell you it's a mystery. We're like, what do you want? I feel like you're changing your mind. Is this what you want? Or no? Is it this? I don't know, right?
Yeah,
And that socialization kind of is a two-edged sword because I mean, some say that women are the purveyors of culture, right? But then if that's the case, then they're kind of teaching, I want this, but you're a man, so be that. And so how do you unpack
and it
that?
feels contradictory, right? Yeah, no, I
Mhm.
agree. That's gonna be our next episode. That's seriously, come back on. Let's do it again. Like, I'm definitely up for it. And if you're watching, please make sure you subscribe, you like, you comment, you leave a comment and let us know what
Yes,
resonated
please.
with you, connect with us. And Damion, I want them to know what you're like what where do they follow you? We're going to put the links and everything in the comments in YouTube, so you have all of the connections to be able to follow me and Damion and see the stuff we're doing. But anything else you want to plug or talk about?
No, no, I think this is awesome. Like, this is not something I get to talk about very much. Usually I'm talking about like, hey, I'm building an AI tool and it's going to do blah, blah, blah. Or I can help you use analytics to grow your audience. So being able to kind of talk about the people of it all is nice.
I love that you did, because I would not have been able to get to the depths of this and all these layers that you unpacked. Like, I learned so much today. So thank you so much. And for those of you who caught something from this in terms of socialization and patterns and unlearning, come join me. My courses, which Damion is partnering with me on for Empowerment Unlocked, will start January 22nd. The link and information is all going to be below for you to be able to join. They are 5 weeks, they're guided courses, it's all virtual, and only $49 for 5 weeks for a limited time. That price is going to go up in January. So get your deal. Get your
Mhm.
deal. Get the spot for yourself,
Get it
because
now.
get it now. Get it now. We've already had one course. It's been awesome. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. And again, it's like, if you're at this place where maybe it's communication with someone else that you need to understand yourself better in what is it you need to do to be present in those relationships. Maybe it's something going on in your life right now, and you are just trying to find your way back to you, because that's what we're doing in Empowerment Unlocked, is finding our way back to ourselves. Because once we know ourselves, once we are grounded in ourselves, we understand our own patterns, our own socialization, we can show up in our authenticity for ourselves and in all the relationships we're in, with men, with women, with our kids, whomever it is. So,
And I'll say, for any guys out there on the fence, definitely sign up. I can honestly say that, having met Marya from the beginning, she's always been incredibly just welcoming and makes you feel really safe. I don't just talk like this with anyone, just so people know. I still have a moment where I could be a little bit like, I'm just gonna sit in the corner. But from day one, Marya has been really great and always been herself, and she really does walk what she talks, right? Like my mom would say, in order to be a friend, you must, like, in order to make a friend, you have to be one. And she did that same thing. Marya was like, I'm going to be vulnerable for you so that you can be vulnerable for me. And I think that says a lot. So know that you'll be in a safe space. Know that it's not going to be like super woo. It's just asking why, who, how do I get to this other place? And it's just about people being real people.
thank you so much, Damion. Like, I really appreciate that. And I feel honored that you feel safe enough to be that person with me. Because, again, to that point, I think as men, it's not easy to find those spaces, and it's not easy to be that woman, those women who can give those spaces. So that means a lot for me to hear that. And yes, definitely, please come and join us. And it is a community. It's a community where you're going to be finding other people who are going to provide that space for you too. And yes, so thank you. Make sure you go and check that link. If you haven't done it yet, subscribe, like, comment here, and check out Marya's Musings. If I should go live again, let me know, because, well, definitely Damion and I are going live again, because we have a conversation
Yes.
to unpack more on. So stay tuned for when that's going to happen. And go check me out on Substack too, because I have my writing that aligns with this whole return and the course with Empowerment Unlocked. So go check out Substack. Pain to Power every Sunday at 8 p.m. And this week I have Wink Loke, which I'm really excited about, talking about his journey as a man, discovering what leadership is in different stages of life. So you're not going to want to miss this conversation, not going to miss all the things. And follow me and Damion.
Thank you, Marya. I can't wait to the part 2.
Thank you. I'm excited for part 2. All right. Love and light, friends.